All right. We have a double header today. Mr. James Keblas from the City of Seattle's Office of Film and Music, followed by Debbie Sterling from Goldie Blocks. So let's start with James Keblas, director of our Seattle Office of Film and Music. He considers this to be one of the best jobs in town. Sue Nixon and I met with James about a month ago in his office, and I can see why he would say that. Seattle is packed with musical energy, from rock and roll to the traditional musicals, hip-hop, jazz, the symphony. The list is endless, and he gets to represent it all to the world. Described as a punk rocker in a suit, or perhaps a living example of the term metro natural, he balances the creative with business and politics. He understands the importance of developing policies that assist this rather complicated and turbulent industry. He got his start in the biz working in hip-hop at Nasty Mix Records, and later helping organize events at the Velvet Elvis Arts Lounge. James later co-founded the Vera Project, a nationally recognized nonprofit music arts center for the youth in Seattle. James is a graduate of the University of Washington. He's married and has twin boys. James.
Thank you very much for having me. I brought an entourage, which always makes my job easier. And Gabe's going to do a song. I'll introduce him in a minute. He's going to get set up while I'm talking. Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be here. My Rotary connection actually is one of my really sincere friends in Europe, in the Netherlands. I met her through a connection through the Rotary, so thank you for making that happen in a strange way. If you ever want a piece of advice for speaking to anybody in the Netherlands or Dutch, you can always say the word alsjeblieft, which basically means everything. And that language is so hard, it's the only word I know, so when Ricky and the Rotary's on are alsjeblieft. Thank you, you're welcome, and have you been working out? You look like you've lost weight, or something like that. The punk rocker in a suit comes from someone who is a skateboarding punk who also gets a degree in architecture and urban planning. You get my job. That's what it comes to. And my job is the director for the Office of Film and Music for the City of Seattle. I paid for by government and tax dollars, and my charge is to make Seattle a great place to make a living making film and music. So we're an economic development agency. We don't give out grants. We don't do anything like that. We try to create an environment for folks in these industries to have success and for Seattle to benefit as a result of that. There's a lot of stories that I could tell in there, but for today, I'm going to focus specifically on music and that story here in the city of Seattle. And hopefully you can take a little bit away from it, and we can answer questions later. Seattle has got this great musical heritage. It has a long, long, long one going back Native American culture, and then we were the first symphony in the country to have a woman conductor. We had jazz legends like Quincy Jones and Ray Charles come from Seattle. We had Jimi Hendrix, of course, what I call the original grunge, with the Wailers and the Kingsmen and Paul Revere and the Raiders and that whole sound with Louie Louie. We had Heart. We had this, of course, incredible rock and roll thing happened in the late 80s, early 90s called grunge. I call it grunge 2.0. And we've had this incredible hip hop legacy, and we have this incredible symphonic scene. Seattle is one of the largest film and video game scoring markets in the world after LA and London. So most of the major feature films that you see, the big ones, or the major video games that are played, and a lot of other stuff, those big symphonic scores are usually done here in Seattle, actually right at the top of the lake in Kenmore in the Bastille Church. So we have this incredible music legacy, and there's a great quote from Spin magazine, a rock and roll magazine, in 1992 at the kind of the height of grunge, and it says, Seattle is currently to the rock and roll world what Bethlehem was to Christianity. No hyperbole there at all. I love that quote. But the story that I want to tell is it wasn't always that way, and then where we are now. And so I'm going to do that, but before I begin, I want to kind of set the tone, so to speak, and have my good friend and incredible musician, Gabriel Mintz, play us a song. Take it away, Gabe.
Thanks a lot, James. Man, welcome to Seattle for those of you who are here from out of town. Absent, I shuffle along, humming a song, hearing it all. I walk into the wall. I love you so much, you're all things at once, but you're killing me, you're killing me, killing me. Every which way that you try, the more you dislike that it's only a dream and you're living a lie. Sharing the wealth, you can't tell yourself that you're killing me, killing me, killing me. It's okay, it's alright, you get it when it's time. It's okay, it's alright, you get it when it's time. Counting things that were missed, such heartbreaking lists. You offered me never believing again. You're out living to tell about the risks and wars, errors in judgment, degenerate mobs. Mirrors and smoke, I know that the jokes that you're killing me, you're killing me, you're killing me. You're killing me, you're killing me, you're killing me. Thank you. Gotta do that once. Yeah, love you.
Debbie, watch your step up here when you come up next. Thank you, Gabe, for doing that. Gabe asked me what song I wanted him to play, and I said, it doesn't matter. All of your songs are good, and I mean that. He's got albums everywhere. You can check him out. Fantastic musician playing around town. And I love to bring Gabe up because he moved to Seattle from the East Coast because of our music scene here. We attract people like that because of music, and that's going to tie into my story here, what I want to talk to you all about. So in our last episode, I said that it hasn't always been this way, and what I mean by that is actually Seattle has had a very complicated, so to speak, relationship with its musical identity. And that's happened in the jazz era, it's happened in the 70s, and it's also happened in what really surfaced in the 80s and 90s. I oftentimes refer to it as Footloose, if you remember the movie with Kevin Bacon. The very Seattle appropriate title, or appropriate for Seattle, because we had things like a teen dance ordinance, where young people couldn't go see music and dance. We had things like an added activities ordinance, where if there was alcohol in a place, there couldn't be live music. We had a poster ban. So when I see Capitol Hill or Belltown or in Ballard or Fremont, and you see the posters on the light poles, to me I see that and I think, wow, it looks like there's a lot going on in this town that's pretty exciting. Well, there were some people that saw that and said that it looks like an eyesore and we should do something about that, along with all of these other things. Really struggling to embrace the music that has given it so much recognition. And that was, so we had this kind of, Kevin Bacon kind of thing happening. And then we had the success of grunge, despite the city and this relationship with music. And the basis for Nirvana, after their success, Chris Novoselic, decided that he wanted to make Seattle embrace its musical identity and own it, and how that would contribute to our culture and our economy. And so he started an organization called Joint Artists Musicians PAC, Jam PAC, and he challenged some of these laws, and he got politicians and our civic leaders to understand that music is a good thing and that we should leverage it, not push against it. And it was his leadership that got things turned around. So in 2002, after then Mayor Greg Nichols was elected, and a few others, and a few of these laws were changed and turned, or just completely written off the books altogether, we started what was called the Seattle Office of Film and Music, which is what I currently run. That was a big turning point because it was the first time that music was brought into government in a constructive way. And we did something right out of the gate called economic impact study that measured the economic value of music in Seattle. And that was what they found when they released that was it's just about as big as the maritime industry here. So if today's numbers, it is over 11,000 jobs here in the city limits, 20,000 if you count King County, $1.2 billion in revenue in the city of Seattle, and over $2 billion if you count the county. So significant contribution to our economy, and all of a sudden people started paying attention. Folks that weren't quite aware of music and what it could do for an economy started inviting music folks to the table and then having these conversations, and then music was actually starting to set the table. So quite a change. And then fast forward a little bit, we said, okay, well, this is good development, but we want to take it just a little bit further. We want to not rest on the laurels of the great musical legacy of the past, but we want to do something with this. Where do we want to be as a city with its musical identity in the year 2020? What would that look like? And so we gathered about 20 or so people from different subsectors of the music community and said, what would you want Seattle to look like in this way? And over the course of a year, we got them all to agree on a vision for that. And if I do nothing else in my life, I'm most proud of getting over 20 egomaniacs to agree on a 3-page document and sign their name on it. Achievement right then and there. That document became what we now call the City of Music. So the City of Seattle owns that trademark. We have adopted it as one of our logos along with some other great ones out there like Metro Natural. And we are embracing that for the first time. And so it's been a great ride to go from, this kind of difficult and oftentimes kind of vicious fight with our music identity to one where we're going at it full speed. And some interesting things have happened as a result of that. One of the things, when we're back in the struggles of our musical identity, the press was really hard on music in this town. If you look back through the archives, and I have a great slideshow that has all of these cartoons of music really as a demon, and Seattle a victim of music. And there was the Seattle Times and the PI and all these other mainstream publications. And when the City of Music initiative was first adopted, one of the first things that we rolled out was how to make this a great place for live music, really understanding that any great music scene at its core is based on live music. That is where musicians hone their craft and cut their teeth. That is where audience is developed. Everything that comes from a business, that grows as a business comes from that place. So we decided to incentivize live music venues and make it better for music venues to thrive in this town. And we give them an admissions tax exemption. And I have this great quote that I wanted to read that came from the Seattle Times editorial staff. And this was after we passed, or it was the mayor had proposed the admissions tax exemption for live music venues. The council was considering it, and this is what they wrote. The live music incentive is a tough request in a tight economy, but the money has the feel of an investment, not a loss to the Treasury. By the way, the clubs and the shows in clubs that feature live music are not the source of the rowdy behavior, but that make the headlines in upset urban neighborhoods. The proposal is most appealing where it proposes to help a valued piece of the economy itself. And so that was from the Times, the same paper that just years earlier was saying we shouldn't be going down this road. So it was a great turn. And a few other things happened as well. Alaska Airlines, Horizon Airlines did a cover story for the In-Flight magazine around being a city of music and the great music legacy. Hotel magazine started promoting music and its legacy. There was a plaque that's still up on the corner of 12th and Jackson that honors its jazz legacy. Most recently, I don't know if you've gone through the airport, but when you walk through there, every screen and speaker in that airport is now promoting local music. There's an app that the airport is promoting that you can take it with you. When you hear the overhead announcements at the airport, you hear things like, Jerry Cantrell from Alice in Chains, a grunge band from the early 90s, who says something along the lines of, the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport is a non-smoking facility. Bummer, dude. And they play that. And the SeaTac Airport has seen a turnaround in the kind of responses that people usually give. Usually it's, my flight is late again, tweet, SeaTac Airport. Now it's, I can't believe I just heard Alan Stone overhead. Or it feels so good to come off a plane and hear local music, I know I'm home. And the rankings have increased for the SeaTac Airport. The Chamber of Commerce has adopted music and has their own music-specific task force. And their thing is about increasing membership because they know that music is a great way to do that. In the schools, we are having a conversation currently where we anticipate having music education in the schools 1 hour every week from the time you enter to the time you leave, and what kind of community that can create knowing that. There's a great statistic I like to give. There are more people in med school that have an undergraduate degree in music than any other degree. It makes great people. We've done other things, the Country Doctor up on Capitol Hill providing health care for musicians, and a number of other things. Most recently, a ranking came out that identified Seattle as the 5th largest music industry in the country. That's pretty significant for a little place in the corner, in the ranks of Los Angeles and New York. The beauty of all of this, though, isn't that we're doing it because it's altruistic. We're doing it because it's good for business. One of my favorite studies came from the Wall Street Journal about a year ago that ranked Seattle the #1 city to attract educated young people out of college. And then they asked the question, if you believe that's economic development, that business follows people, you have to change the question, ask individuals, what do they want? The first answer is always the same. Beautiful mountains and clean water. Probably the #1 thing you can do for economic development. The second one, the music scene. So it wasn't that you're doing music because it creates jobs in and of itself. It's good for the economic portfolio because it creates the next Boeing engineer, the next restaurateur, the next you name it. It's a good thing to have. And you can see this surface with what South Korea is doing right now. And my last note, the artist Psy, who does the song Gangnam Style? That is a manufactured attempt from the government and Samsung to make South Korea culturally adopted so that we think, when we think of South Korea, that is a good thing. I understand that culture. I will buy those products because music is capable of doing that. And that's what we're trying to do with the City Music Initiative here in Seattle. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, James. Watch out for the water up here, Debbie. Okay, well, timing is everything. And so Paul Sisman gave me this article in the Wall Street Journal today, not yesterday's, but today. And it says, can new building toys for girls improve math and science skills? I wonder who was responsible for that article. Well, you'll find out more about that in just a few seconds. Then I'll give you this article afterwards, Debbie. So you may recall last week that our speaker commented on the lack of women role models in the science and engineering sectors? Well, we have one today, and her name is Debbie Sterling. Debbie is not only an engineer, but an owner-founder of Goldie Blocks, a toy company, and has made it her mission in life to tackle the gender gap in science, tech, engineering, and mathematics. Goldie Blocks is a toy company that engages children to build through the story of Goldie, the girl inventor who solves problems by creating simple machines. Debbie writes and illustrates Goldie's stories. She got her inspiration from her grandmother, one of the first female cartoonists and one of the creators of Mr. Magoo. Her company launched in 2012 and raised over $285,000 in 30 days through Kickstarter. So she's also an entrepreneur. Debbie completed her degree in engineering at Stanford University in product design and lives in San Francisco. Her title today is Inspiring the Next Generation of Female Engineers. Debbie, come on up.
Water spill down here. I'm going to come around the front. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here to speak at the Rotary. Before I begin, I'd like to ask you all to close your eyes. Everyone's eyes closed? Okay. Not everyone's eyes are closed. There we go. I'd like you to close your eyes and picture an engineer. Give me a thumbs up when you have a picture in your head. Okay. Open your eyes. Raise your hand if you pictured a man sitting alone at a computer. Okay? Maybe he works at Microsoft or Amazon. Raise your hand if you pictured a train conductor. Okay. We got some of those. How about raise your hand if you picture a young hacker guy in a hoodie? Mark Zuckerberg. Raise your hand if you pictured somebody who looks like me. Okay, a couple, not so many hands. So I'm an engineer. I studied mechanical engineering and product design at Stanford, and now I've started a toy company called Goldie Blocks, trying to get little girls interested in engineering. If you didn't raise your hand for me, I'd like you to please get up and leave. No, just kidding. If you didn't raise your hand for me, it's totally fine. I get it all the time. Usually when I tell people I'm an engineer, they laugh and say, no, really, what do you do? Or I remember distinctly when I told my mother I wanted to study engineering, she said, ew, why? And, you know, it's not that weird to get that from so many people. Actually, only 11% of engineers in the US are women. So I'm one of a big minority, and I don't fit in. But I'm here today to talk to you guys all about how I believe our little girls will. So I'm going to start my story when I was a little girl. I grew up in a small town in Rhode Island, went to public school, and I was a pretty normal little kid. I liked drawing and writing and dress up and all of those little girly things. It wasn't until I was a senior in high school, actually, that I first heard the word engineering. And it was brought up by my math teacher. I had asked her to write my recommendation letter for college. And she said, okay, I'd love to. What do you plan on majoring in? I'd like to mention it in the letter. And I said, I don't know. She said, how about engineering? I think you would really excel in it. And I closed my eyes, and I pictured an old man driving a train. And I remember thinking, why would this woman think I want to drive trains? And the funny thing is, I didn't know what engineering was, and I was too embarrassed to ask her. So I just kind of forgot about it. And I got into Stanford, which in my school was a big deal. They announced it over the loudspeaker. And I went off to college, and my whole freshman year, I took all these different classes. And I kind of liked everything, and I couldn't decide what I wanted to major in. And it was the last quarter of my freshman year, and we're kind of getting down to the wire. Everyone's picking their majors. And I was starting to get stressed out, and I remembered that math teacher. Her voice had stuck in my head. You should try engineering. I think you would like it. And so I went ahead and I signed up for Mechanical Engineering 101. And I was scared to death. I thought it was going to be my first ever F, and I was shaking walking into that classroom. But it turned out that in that class, I was surprised to find that we weren't working on train engines. We were learning about what engineering really is, which is kind of how you make stuff and inventing stuff and designing things for people, things that make people's lives better. It was such an empowering skill set to be able to learn all of the tools to make anything you dream up in your head. And with my artistic and creative background, I'd always thought that engineering would be just way too technical and not interesting at all. And I learned, oh my gosh, this is pure creativity. I loved it. I was hooked, and I declared it as my major. But there was one small problem. I was one of the few girls in the program, and I always felt like I did not fit in. And about halfway through my major, this really hit the fan when I took a one-unit engineering drawing class. I signed up for this class, and I was really excited, actually, because I'd always loved art and drawing, and I thought, oh, I'm going to totally ace this class. And I went in there ready to go, and we were learning how to draw in perspective and in 3D. And this funny thing happened where I hit a mental block, and it was really hard for me to draw in perspective. And I remember spending hours and hours on these drawings and not quite getting it. So it was one of our last days of class. We had to all put our final drawing assignments on the wall. And again, I'm one of a handful of girls in this class. There's about 80 guys and about 5 girls. And the 2 teachers, both male. And we get up, we're going through all the drawings on the wall. It looks like everyone else has scribbled theirs in about 5 minutes before they showed up. And then we get to my drawing, which I'd spent hours on. And the teachers get up to mine, and they say, okay, everybody, raise your hand if you think Debbie should pass this class. And I stood there humiliated, face beet red. All the other students are kind of awkwardly hand half up, not knowing what to do. And the teacher said, come on, raise your hand if you think Debbie should pass this class. Luckily, a friend of mine, one of my classmates, he stood up for me. And he said to them, how dare you humiliate her in front of all these other students? She's worked so hard. You should be teaching her, not humiliating her like this in front of the rest of the class. And so I ran out of the room, started crying. And at that moment, I wanted to give up. I was going to get out of engineering. I thought it wasn't for me. And my friend came out, and he said, no, Debbie, don't worry. We're going to do this together. I'm going to help you. Don't give up on this. And so I believed in him, and I didn't give up. And I started working harder. I spent really late nights at the library, up until 3 in the morning, working on my engineering assignments. And it was there that I saw all the other guys in my class, the guys that I thought were just geniuses at this stuff that just got it. They were there at 3 in the morning, too. So I said, wait a minute. I realized you're not just born with this stuff, but you just have to work really hard. And I worked really hard, and I graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering and product design in 2005. And I remember walking across that stage, and it was the proudest day of my life, because it wasn't easy. It was really challenging. But when you overcome a challenge like that, you become invincible, and you believe that you can really do anything. And so after graduating, I had a pretty circuitous career path, searching for my passion, what I wanted to do with my life. And a couple years ago, I found it. And it actually happened in a kind of a funny way. I started a tradition with a group of friends of mine called Idea Brunch. We would get together and make breakfast, and each person would have a chance to get up in front of the group and share their latest harebrained invention. And during one of those sessions, my friend Christy, actually, who studied engineering with me at Stanford, she got up And she said, I'm a female engineer, and I'm sick of how few other female engineers there are. And what is it about me? I'm not some kind of freak of nature. Why aren't there more female engineers? And she said, well, when I was a little kid, I grew up playing with my older brother's hand-me-down Legos. Because I had 3 older brothers. If it were my choice, I would have had dolls. But by then, our parents were sick of buying new toys, so I got stuck with the Legos. And when I played with them, I started to get interested in building. I started to learn how stuff fits together. And so it was natural for me that I would be interested in engineering. And as I heard her talk, I thought back to my childhood. It was me and my little sister. And our parents never bought us those toys. My dad was an engineer, and I never even knew. They thought that, never knew. And they just assumed that we wouldn't like them because Legos and erector sets and Lincoln Logs, those were boys' toys. And I remember thinking, I missed out. And so many girls are missing out. And I thought, well, that was back then when I was a little kid. By now, I'm sure that the toy aisle is filled with things for boys and girls. So I went to the toy store to check it out. And I couldn't believe what I saw. I felt like I was back in the 1950s. There was the pink aisle for girls and the blue aisle for boys. And in the pink aisle, there was decorating and ironing boards and toys to teach you how to be a housewife, pop stars and impossibly skinny girls. And in the boys' aisle, that's where all the really good engineering stuff was. That was the roller coasters and the building sets and the more challenging, complex things. And so I stood there in that toy store, and I knew this is it. This is what I have to do. And I'm an engineer. I'm a female engineer. I was once a little girl, so who better than me to tackle this challenge of creating a toy that would spark an interest in engineering in all of these girls' hearts and minds, the toy that I wish I had had growing up. So I became obsessed with this idea, so obsessed that I left a very comfortable job, and I decided, okay, looked at my bank account, here are my life savings, I can go a year to work on this project before I'd be homeless in the street. And I'll give it a year, and if it works out, great, and if it doesn't, I could always go get another job. So I took the entrepreneurial leap and holed up in my apartment and started doing research. I started meeting with neuroscientists, teachers, families, anybody I could get my hands on to learn about kids and cognitive development, gender differences. I even put up an ad on Craigslist, free childcare for girls 2 through 9. That one didn't work out so well, so luckily I had some friends who had kids, and they let me come over and play. And so I would go out into the store and buy construction toys, and I'd put them on the floor, and I'd watch the kids play with them. And this funny pattern started to emerge where the girls would play with a construction toy, and then they'd get bored after a few minutes. So I'd say, okay, well then what's your favorite toy? And they would run upstairs and come back and bring a book. And they would say, this is my favorite book, let's read this book together. This literally happened 5 times in a row. And around the same time, all of the academic research that I was reading was talking about the development of verbal skills in girls at a young age, and how girls really loved stories and characters and empathizing with characters and playing make-believe and role-playing. And so I'm sitting there on the floor of this playroom, and I've got the construction set to my left and a book on the floor to my right. And I had this aha moment where I thought, well, what if we put these 2 things together? So instead of just the instruction manual with here's what to do, 1, 2, 3, what if I wrote a narrative about a girl engineer character named Goldilocks? And as you read her story and follow along on her adventures, she has to solve problems by building simple machines. So my idea was that if the girls liked Goldie and they wanted to be like Goldie and do what she does, then they would want to build with a construction kit. And even better, if I had Goldie building things that had a purpose, that helped people, it would start talking about engineering a different way for girls to realize that it does make a difference, that engineering can help make the world a better place. So I got to work, and thanks. I started sketching these books and stories about Goldie, and I started prototyping machines in my apartment. I went around and I found thread spools and pegboard from the hardware store, ribbon and clay, and I made my first prototype, which had Goldie building a belt drive, where we would put little axles in the pegboard with wheels on top and little characters that she would have to spin. Now, what girl would want to build a belt drive? That sounds kind of boring. So I wrote this story about Goldie and her little dog named Nacho, who was always chasing his tail and getting tired. So she invents a spinning machine for Nacho using a wheel and an axle. And as the story progresses, her other pets want to spin too. So by the end, the building gets more complex until she has to spin everybody. So I had this, it's a very ramshackle prototype, like the ugliest thing you've ever seen. And I took it around to homes all around the Bay Area, anybody I could meet, and put my prototype down on the floor and watched the girls and their siblings and parents and brothers play with it. And each time I went and observed the kids, I learned so much and it got a little better. And I would make changes along the way until I tested it on over 100 kids. And by the end, I had girls in tutus building belt drives and cheering in triumph. And I knew that I was really onto something. So I packed up my prototype and I brought it to the New York International Toy Fair, which is the largest toy trade show in the US. And I started talking to toy industry folks to see what they thought of it and if they thought it had promise. And they all kind of looked at me, patted me on the head, and said, you know, nice try, but psh, has anyone ever told you that construction toys for girls don't sell? P.S., toy industry, very male-dominated. And yet again, I'm not fitting in, but I'm walking around, and they said, here, let us show you what does sell. And they take me to the pink aisle and show me all the mean girls and the kitchenware. And, you know, it was tough to hear, but I didn't want to give up. So I left Toy Fair, and I decided I was going to put my idea out to the world to see if anyone besides my parents thought it was a good idea. So I went up, I put it up on this website called Kickstarter, which is a crowdfunding platform. And I put up the Goldie Blox toy and said, okay, I've made this toy, and if you believe in it, then you can buy one for $30. But the thing is, the minimum production run is $5,000. So if I can raise $150,000 in 30 days, then I can make this toy real. I had 30 days to do it and hit the goal in 4. And since then, everything has changed. It's exploded. And we've just recently hit our $1 million mark in revenue just from parents and kids buying from our goldieblox.com website. And we've just shipped out over 20,000 toys, and the response has been incredibly overwhelming, and they've just been crying with pictures and videos of girls loving this toy and getting excited about engineering, which is what it's all about. And this week we're going out into stores. So Goldie will be sitting on the shelves next to Bob the Builder and Handy Manny and Sid the Science Kid. And she'll be up there with her little tool belt and her overalls. And my goal really is to give girls a role model so they can see themselves in engineering and hopefully spark an interest in it. So thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for that ovation for Debbie. We're going to have a little time for some questions.
Hi, what a wonderful story. We've been trying science projects on our grandchildren, who are both girls. Now there's a boy added, so he can use their hand-me-downs. But what's the age group that Goldie Blocks is really, or groups that Goldie Blocks is targeted at?
Well, we've just launched our first toy, which is the introduction to Goldie Blocks and the first construction pieces. And we're hearing that it's really resonating with girls ages 4 through 9. Eventually, I want to expand the brand to hit a bunch of different age groups the same way that Lego does, but that's where we started.
Thank you for your inspiring story. So here you are, you're off the ground, $1 million in revenue. What's the 5-year goal?
So, good question. The 5-year goal is I want to build a character brand. So if you think about characters like Dora the Explorer, Bob the Builder, these are characters in pop culture that kids really fall in love with and want to emulate and help create what their interests are. So I want Goldie to become one of these iconic characters internationally that kids can experience with on multiple platforms. So toys, apparel, cartoons, video games. That's a lot to do in 5 years, but that's my plan.
Where can we find Goldilocks? I need a birthday present for a granddaughter.
So far, the only place that it's been available for the last 6 months was on our website, goldieblocks.com, which we're still selling. You can also find it on a little website called amazon.com, as well as numerous specialty stores all across the U.S. And if you go to our website, goldieblocks.com, there's a link where you can find a store, and we have all of our stores on there now, and we're keep updating it because we're adding a lot of stores every day.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Seattle Rotary Online is made possible in part by a grant from First Choice Health, working with the Washington Health Information Collaborative to use technology to bring better health care to patients throughout the Pacific Northwest. First Choice Health.